Good evening, heathens. I hope you're all doing well and surviving the week. Welcome to another episode of the Heavy Metallurgy Album Club. I'm one of your hosts. I'm Marty. It's good to see everybody. And I got some fine young gentlemen here. Oh, look at that. Balloons for everyone. Yeah. Fine young gentleman here. Logan, Metal and Beer Snob. How are you?
I'm doing great. Made it to another Wednesday. It's been a good week so far. As far as what we're spinning, I got to commend the tournament, the bracket you guys did. Way more fun than actual March Madness.
That pissed off a lot of people.
Isn't it more fun that way? Isn't that what you wanted?
Kellen's still pissed. Yep.
I'm here to ponder some of that actually, because one of the things that I was like, what's going on? What's going on? Is how did this keep beating out album after album? Fucking Blessed Are the Sick by Morbid Angel, which is a good album. It is. But it beat out, I had it losing in the first round to Consider Dead by Gorguts, first off. And if it had
that's
advanced,
not right. That's not right. I mean, Consider Dead rules, but yeah.
But I had like there was Covenant and Altars of Madness in there, and they both, did pretty good. So I don't know. I thought I was like, okay, we can lose this one, but me thinking that kind of brought me to the realization that I kind of undervalue this, or I've always looked at this. Oh my god!
Oh my! It scared me even.
He jumped. He was up on the shelf right here. Sorry about that. Where was I? That I undervalue this as the first three. Like, this is my least listened to of the first three, and I'm like, why is that? Why do I look down on Blessed Are the Sick? And I think it's because of the interlude tracks. I think the interludes kind of, break up the album a little bit and make it seem less interesting. And then it also feels a little bit like a transitionary record. I of course heard this third. It was, Altars of Madness, then Covenant, then this one. So this just feels like in between those two. But I will say tracks like The Ancient Ones and Blasphemy and, or that might be a different one. Abominations. Those are awesome. So, I mean, this is still worthwhile that it made the cut to where it did. That's probably not the biggest injustice of the night, but I'll leave it be there.
There were several.
Are you gonna talk about them later? I'd love to hear. But I also managed to go to a concert on Friday instead of seeing it your guys' tournament live. But I saw X Hoarder, which was a requirement on my New Orleans band bucket card list or bingo list. So they did play a couple tracks off of Slaughter in the Vatican, so I was happy. We got the self-titled track and a couple other good ones. And then I also got to see Flesh Parade, which was a must-see for me. This is a classic New Orleans grindcore band that released a bunch of stuff on Relapse back in the 90s, and this doesn't look like grind. This was their weird 2010 album called Dirty Sweet, which still sounds like super screamy, super intense grindcore, so I'll take it. And then finally, I picked up a Heavy Metallurgy Album Club related album after putting it off, and I finally have Psalm 9 in the collection. Took me long enough. About time. Yep. Came in today. Haven't even unwrapped it, but later tonight or tomorrow I will be spinning this and enjoying tracks like The Tempter and Fall of Lucifer and Victim of the Insane. So can't wait.
Awesome. Good to see you. And there were calls out there for a thrash metal episode with Morbid Crank himself to join us, so that's going to be something to look forward to and coerce Jim's to do here in the future. That'll be fun.
I second that call.
He can get mad too. All right,
can't wait.
Everybody's mad. It's fun.
Yeah, it was. Anyway, I do also want to say, Logan, that was cool. Marty, in passing, gave you a shout out for staying up and apparently helped find the bracket stuff. Late last Wednesday. So
yep.
Anyway, whereas I can no longer trust the panel in terms of their choice in the music anymore. For the utmost disappointment that I experienced. It was a lot of fun. and it was a good time. I'll never forgive Alan for throwing Symphonies of Sickness to the side. So,
Yeah,
anyway,
that was
That was the one I was referencing. Yeah.
It would have come down to Necroticism versus Symphonies, and that would have been hard. That's a hard choice. They're both so damn perfect.
yeah, I was like, I'm sorry, Devin came to the defense of Blessed, but I thought Altars was going to be the one that you needed to be there in the championship, or at least the final four, in my opinion.
And the fact that people are all pissed off that Necroticism won, I mean, how horrible. An amazing record won. Oh, geez.
It's great. It happens with every single final, like, whatever tournament it's going to happen. It was a great episode. So anyway, that was super cool. Shout out to Patrick Hoot for joining and jumping in, posing
Absolutely.
the idea. So this week, just kind of go over this quickly. Things I've been spinning. This one actually was kind of inspired by, I've been listening to whatever the new Venator release, because that'll be the next review I do for the channel. But Jim's question came in the other day, and this kind of inspired a few selection. This is Black Hole's Land of Mystery, doom band out of Italy, and another one, Henbane, Cultist of Ghouls, and last one, something a little bit different. This isn't really sort of a metal thing, but this is Layla Abdul Rauf's Fantasia. This is on Cyclic Law. She plays trumpet on this, but it's more of like an ambient listen. People may recognize her. She's in a bunch of different projects. Hammers of Misfortune. She's also in Bastum, but she's also an accomplished trumpet player. So this is kind of her ambient project. So anyway, things I've been spinning.
Well, for me, went shopping with the kid this weekend, and he bought more metal than I did, but I didn't have much money anyway. But this, I did not. Alan sent me this, so I've been spinning Overkill Scorch. This is the latest Overkill record. He's got a thing where when Nuclear Blast signs these old bands, he tells them you have to write in the old vein or the contract is null and void. So it's Overkill. It's solid. It's a bit long, but I enjoy it. It's a good record. Definitely worth spinning on vinyl. One of the record shops downstate, I got this for, I don't know, $10. Ravens Stay Hard. This album is not as bad as I remember it. I had this on tape when it came out, and I didn't care for it a whole lot, but yeah, I don't know. It's a ridiculous cover and name, and I don't know. You guys heard this one?
No.
No.
Not with a title like that.
Quite the album cover. Yeah.
They did a couple albums for Atlantic. This one and The Pack Is Back are the two that they might have done one after that or before that. I don't remember, but I had both of those on tape, and it's just more commercial Raven. Raven rips. They're a great band. An awesome ultimate power trio, super technical, just really great, kind of thrashy, but new wave of British heavy metal thrashy type of style. They're just a great band. Great instrumentals, great instrumentalists. They're amazing bass. John's amazing singer and bass player. I think that's the big thing about Raven. A lot of people aren't too super stoked with his voice sometimes, but I dig it. I think it's cool. But yeah, this was a good pickup. I wasn't disappointed at all. And then I got a couple non-metal records too. Lead into Gold. I got the Low and Slow EP, and then The Eternal Present. This is Paul Barker from, used to be in Ministry, the bass player. It's his industrial project. Very Chicago sounding industrial. Kind of plotting, a lot of bass lines, kind of hypnotic bass lines. It's been kind of a mood I've been in lately, so yeah. That's what I've been spinning. There was other stuff, but it's up in the vehicle. I forgot to bring it in, so we'll get it next time. And Jim is next, and there's Jim.
Sorry, I said to get a hoodie. It's freaking cold in here. We got the AC. It's on 77, but it's still freezing, blowing right on me. Anyway, I started out with some Greek in my journey today. Thou art Lord, the Regal Pulse of Lucifer.
It's a good album.
It is. It is a good album. It's a killer title and killer title track. That is the best song on the record, and it's just so catchy, so awesome. It's like Rotting Christ without all the extra stuff they got into doing later. And it's the guys from Rotting Christ, that makes sense. But good stuff. Then I just wanted to hear a lot of ugly albums, so pulled back out the old Order of Chaos for the dirty and the ugly. I don't know what is about this stuff, man, but I really like these guys. And what else? Let's see, of course we got old Pete, destined for Angel Corpse, and Chuck there for Aries Kingdom. I like all those bands as well. And back to Lucifer's Hammer, back to Michigan Love here, man.
That's one of my favorite demos. I love that demo.
It is so good,
heavy
man.
as shit. It's so good.
So heavy.
Yep.
Atmospheric with the keys here and there, but also the killer samples. Man, this is just metal to the core, and it's
They're
dark.
great live too.
Yeah, I would have loved to see these guys live. That would have been awesome. But yeah, this is a worthy demo if you don't have it. But I know I've shown those before, but I don't care. They're awesome, and I show what I listen to. So, all right, that's it.
Right on. Well, I did this out of order here, but yeah, today we're talking about the Jim picked the debut self-titled album by Rigor Mortis. Came out in 1988.
Yep.
88. And a little bit of info. Rigor Mortis was an American thrash metal band that formed in November 1983 in the Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas Metroplex. What was I going to read here? Mike Scaccia. I can never say his name. Scaccia. Rest in peace.
Is it like an Italian, like Scaccia?
Scaccia, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Also played guitar with industrial metal band Ministry, Revolting Cocks, Lard, and others. Casey Orr plays bass in the shock rock band GWAR. Actually, he's been in and out of GWAR. He's played on the bands. He was Beefcake the Mighty, the bass player. Ragnarok, Carnival of Chaos, We Kill Everything, Violence Has Arrived, Lust in Space, Bloody Pit of Horror, and the 2022 album, The New Dark Ages. Thought I'd add that little tidbit for any GWAR fans out there. Hardin Harrison also plays drums in the metal bands Speed Dealer and Mitra. Bruce Corbett also sang for the thrash metal band Warbeast, formerly Texas Metal Alliance. Former Rigor Mortis vocalist, guitarist Doyle Bright also played guitar in the metal band Hollow's Eve. He currently performs vocals and guitars in the band SOG. So yeah. Mike passed away from a heart attack while performing on stage in 2012. And I believe, right here, Bruce Corbett vocalist died on January 25th, 2019 at the age of 56 from a long battle with cancer. So, man, sucks. But, we're here to talk about the 1988 debut album. And we're going to start with Kellen. What were your first impressions of Rigor Mortis?
Rough, nasty thrash record from the late 80s. Whose album choice is this?
Yep.
So
that's why there's 50 people here. If it's anything else, it's there's nobody here.
We know our audience, or Jim does at least.
When Jim picks, we should just let Jim pick every week.
Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, so what I did not, I'll say this. I got that right off the bat, right? Like I kind of knew what to expect when this first starts playing. I didn't expect the instrumental. I'd never heard this record before. What I did not expect, and probably what is like the lasting impression at one, was the consistency of how busy the guitar work was over the entire listen.
Yeah.
Two was just that there's a little bit of the humor, kind of like horror film, they're having a good time kind of deal, like where this record leans into thrash as it transitions into kind kind of death metal at this time period, how they are incorporating like more lyrical concepts that are pushing thrash towards something extreme, like, but sonically it's not quite there. That was kind of my impression, right? It's like as we're venturing into death metal, this band clearly is a thrash band to me, especially on this record. But it's kind of getting into the grisly guts and gore stuff of death metal, and they're having a good time about it. So like the humor, sort of good nature aspect of this record, I did not see coming. And just the guitar work is all over this record. It is so that was probably my initial impression hearing it.
Logan.
Yeah, this is yet another example of classic 80s thrash that I've just never gotten around to listening to. And I think I've determined that for me, thrash, I've just gotten into the big, localized scenes. You got the Bay Area, you got the East Coast, then you go over to Germany, jump back down to Brazil, and anything else I kind of have missed. So thank you, Jim, for helping to set that right. This to me definitely sounds like, straight up thrash metal. Like, this isn't a question of, is it speed metal? Are we getting close to death metal? Where are we? I agree with the lyrical content, but like the core, this sounds like not even 1988 thrash. This sounds like 85, 86, like, this dropped the same year that Rain and Blood kind of dropped, or even a year earlier, 1985. So I definitely immediately enjoyed it. There was very energetic. The lyrical nature of it was kind of immediately engaging to me. And we've got a song about Reanimator for crying out loud, that's a way to my heart. And I want to say that the album art is badass. I've known about Rigor Mortis for a bit because of the album cover, but it's an example of an album cover doing something simple, but it being kind of cool, with just the kicked in like eye socket logo and the weapons and stuff. It's that's a sick t-shirt right there. First listen, it was just like, flew by me, kind of exactly what I would want. The vocals were very overblown, like definitely a lot of reverb and stuff. And the sound was very guitar forward. I remember being impressed that they opened it with like a 3-minute guitar solo. Basically, that was their, we're here kind of thing. So I definitely, on the initial listen, I was, shock and awe with the Rigor Mortis setup.
Yeah. For me, this is one of those tapes that always sat on the rack at Camelot. I'd pick it up, I'd look at it, and people are saying how they love the cover. I hated the cover. I still don't like the cover. I know it's kind of iconic at this point, but it just didn't have the I need to have this buying thing for me back then. So I'd let it go. And a friend of mine picked it up. And I checked it out when he got it, and I'm like, man, this sounds too clean. I'm just so used to hearing like the Creators and the German nastiness, and just thinking. And then I started looking. This came out on Capitol. Other bands. It was kind of towards getting late in the years for thrash metal, but the big labels were trying to look at bands like Power Mad. That Absolute Power was picked up after an EP. Power Mad was picked up after an EP to do Absolute Power. I was underwhelmed by that too. Just really super slick. It sounded like a Minnesota band wanting to be Testament in a way, and it just seemed like the majors were always late to the party, and they were just kind of picking up all the other bands that were still available. So I've given Rigor Mortis a very, very lame chance over the years, and I just got the CD a year or two ago. In fact, I sent it to Jim, and I listened to it. I liked it. I just wasn't in the mood for it, and I knew he was looking for it. I'm like, this will come my way again. So I sent it to him just so he could have it. And I got to say, listening to this album this weekend, it's great. I really regret not investing that. This would have been one of those rippers that I would have glommed onto back in the day and would have spun endlessly. It's clean sounding. And I don't know that I love the guitar tone, but how it works with the bass. It interacts with the bass. Casey Orr's bass work. You know, he plays with a pick. He's really a technical bass player. He's got a really cool, clean bass sound. It just works. It's their own sound. They don't sound like anybody else that I can put my finger on. And Bruce Corbett's vocals, he just kind of a stately, kind of a commanding way of talking, kind of melodiously talking, yelling. It's a cool vibe, and the music is fantastic. Yeah, I'm like, shit, I'm gonna have to get this on record someday. Hopefully it'll come my way, come my way for a good price. But Jim, obviously you picked it. What'd you think?
So yeah, I remember reading in Thrash Metal magazine before it came out. It was gonna, it was getting good reviews, and of course the cover, like it drew me in. Like I loved it, and it was I was a huge Slayer fan in '88, and so obviously these guys in terms of tempo, in terms of tremolo picking, and more or less content, like there's a lot of Slayer love going on here, except Mike Scaccia is a much more shreddy guitar player. You know what I mean? But the thing is, though, is he incorporates his shred. It just comes. It's just part of the song. It doesn't really live
part of the riff.
Yeah. It's part of the riff. And even when he's playing solos, like they make sense. They kind of descend and they ascend. They're done on movements, and I love how they don't track over the solos. It's just guitar and bass. And for me at the time, being a young bass player, hearing the bass so prevalent and being such an important aspect of a band where they weren't trying to hide it with overdubs and anything, like it really floored me. It was exactly what I needed to hear at the time. And, I love Orr's bass sound. And to Marty's point, like his lines are just amazing.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of times where he follows the solos sometimes on this album. I mean, that's how awesome of a bass player he is. He's like, yeah, I'll shred on some scales with you, buddy. I mean, and as thin and as chorus heavy the guitar tone is on this album, Casey's bass sound is so strong and so prevalent that it sounds super heavy to me anyway. And, and also, like, one of the things that stood out to me about Rigor Mortis is they didn't go for the easy mosh part, palm muted breakdown thing like so many other bands were doing at that time. These songs are, if they're either fast all the way through without any let up, or they do just to go halftime, but it's still just like, open chord, like down. More in common was like, mid-period Bathory chords than like, anything palm muted. It wasn't about the mosh. It was just about pure metal, pure intensity, more akin to like something with a punk attitude than, something that was like, happy thrash. It's like, no mosh, no fun Texas metal is what this is, but fun in terms of, to Kellen's point, that sense of humor was there. And that actually appealed to me too. They're not a joke band, but, they have, obviously, most of their song titles are from horror movies. And, with a kid at the time, watching things like Faces of Death and stuff like that on video, like,
and wishing that I didn't.
Yeah.
I watched all those death and dying documentaries, and every time I'm like, why did I watch that?
Oh yeah,
anyway,
I watched plenty of heinous stuff. Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Return of the Living Dead Part 2, all that stuff. Like it was really just kind of like an album that kind of fit right for me. And to this day, that's really the only horror I still love is like the stuff from the 80s and the 70s. But so it really hit the sweet spot for me. And another thing about Bruce, I got to say something about his voice is like you can understand every word that he says, man. He's got this really cool metal voice. And I got to say, I love that Jurgen's first post tonight was like the first verse of Demons and that he's got it memorized because, dude, I did too, man. We are instruments of evil. We come straight from hell. We are the legions of the demons that are hunting for the kill. Cathedrals are not cemeteries. Demons all you see. We have come to take your life and bring you misery. I love that. I love it, man. I would just like, my brother and I had this cool setup in the basement of our parents' house. We spray painted this sheet board that said the dungeon in it, and we had a stereo and some couches. We had metal posters up everywhere, and we would just crank up, stuff like this, and just scream along with the words, and it just completely brings me back to that every time I play this record. So, obviously it's got that nostalgia hit for me, but honestly, man, this album still rips. It still hits. I love it just as much as I did all those years ago. So I'm really excited to talk about it tonight. So cool. You guys want to go
Right
straight
on.
to the question? Or
Hell yeah.
okay. So this question popped up immediately for me when I was listening to it. Wait, where's my email, yo? Where'd it go? Okay, all right. Let's see. As I said, many of the song titles are taken from horror films: Demons, Reanimator, Condemned to Hell, Wizard of Gore, etc. This horror film metal music link is nothing new, as of course the first metal album ever had both its title and band's name taken from the 1963 Italian horror film Black Sabbath. Which intersection of metal and horror resonates most strongly with you, and why? And 55 years after the dawn of metal, has the thematic connection between the horror genre and metal music worn thin? Or do you see the two as inextricably linked? Kellen.
Well, look at you go. So is it okay? Let me just go with the first part of that question. Where does it resonate most with me? I don't know if there's a part that I would necessarily eliminate as not. The one place, though, I'm tired of it is within brutal death metal. That, like, using consistent horror samples or going back to Fulci films to try and conjure up, like, use those samples, those inspirations. I think that has worn thin for me personally. I don't feel like a connection or that is inspiring or inventive at this point in time. I then know it probably was super important early on in like death metal's history to try and establish that connection, and it was so clear that they would be influenced by it. But that part is where I'm kind of tired. I think I don't have a problem with its continued, 55 years into the genre. I don't have a problem with its persistence within the genre. What I do feel metal albums don't necessarily capture is like the overall experience that a film provides outside of just like a single sort of snapshot, right? So meaning like you watch a great horror film, it's not just like a single death scene, right? I think there's like accumulation that the experience that's like atmosphere, overall tension. There's like a collective sense of like what a film is that albums I don't think often enough that draw their inspiration from the film are able to convey in sound. I think it's hard to do that, but great horror films for me have all those factors. And what I wish metal did more often was to try and take a collective approach. Like that's why I pulled out, Black Hole as an Italian doom band. Those like giallo films of the 60s have like this psychedelic thing going on to them as well. That's like when I think of a lot of Italian horror, like during the 1960s and 70s, that's what like comes to mind for me. And Black Hole's a band that taps into that. Cult des Ghouls is like a Polish black metal band, but that record feels creepy in a way that I don't think often a black metal band or a death metal band or other extreme bands kind of tap into. So would be my one point of contention and criticism is like, if you're going to go and be inspired by a horror film, like an appreciation for the entirety of the film rather than just sort of like a singular death scene or like, hey, that was a cool movie, let's write a song about that. Like it's the breadth of the experience that I'm looking for.
All right, Logan.
Yeah, for me, horror was a favorite element of mine, definitely getting into metal. I think I was getting into like 1980s, 90s horror around the same time I was getting into death metal, and it just it meshed perfectly. Being able to watch Evil Dead and then put on the song Evil Dead by Death, and it just made perfect sense. And I'm actually not tired of generic horror and death metal. I will, I'll take it. It's comfort food to me. It feels natural. It's like peanut butter and jelly, white on rice. It just meshes perfectly. Like, is it interesting? Is it going to challenge me? No, but I want every year a couple of albums that are just right there, that like horror themed, middle of the road, pulverizing death metal that references, a different movie every song, has like this anthology kind of feel to it. And yeah, it's just a fun romp through the swamp of, rotting corpses basically. And yeah, I definitely relate horror and metal mainly with death metal. Like I can definitely get it in other places, but thrash, for example, is never a place that I would go to for like horror themed lyrics or ideas. I know I'll typically associate with like either talking about chugging beer or politics. That's thrash for me, and they'll sing about a horror movie every now and then, but it's not the central theme of an album. And it was kind of refreshing to hear. Uh, Rigor Mortis do that on this album, and I definitely enjoyed it. And I think this could fit in my easy to digest like death metal ripping corpses and druid lords that I've got. Yeah, I mean, even in 2025, I'm not tired of horror in my death metal. I want to name drop a couple. The album Nightmare Fuel by Guts. Check that out. Sickness Attracts Sickness by Mephitic Corpse. That one's fucking awesome. And then I've just recently discovered this Mortality Denied by Rancid Cadaver. So 3 death metal albums from 2025 that, are preserving the perfect symbiosis between death metal and horror. But I'm all on board with thrash bringing it as well. I will say that I do wish more bands would try to go the Deceased route and kind of to what you're saying, Kellen, actually bring the vibe and the feel of a horror movie to the whole album experience. I mean,
inspired by, but not ripping off.
Inspired by, but and like taking their own, spin on it, like basically doing the King Diamond effect for a full album. Like metal bands have a full album to play with it. Don't just relegate it to a song or to an element here and there. Like, get a little more inventive with it. And I mean, Deceased have been doing it for decades, so definitely rightful legends there. But yeah, for me, horror and metal, and particularly death metal, is not going anywhere. The horror might change, but it'll still be there. I mean, just look at Fluids is now using like actual real life samples in their music, and that's horrifying in of itself. So it's still around for sure.
Yeah, for me, horror films was a thing. When I was a teenager, I worshipped. I loved them. I watched them all the time. Slasher films, and then my dad was a butcher, worked at a slaughterhouse. They started their own business and did farm butchering, and I helped him. And once I was involved in an industry that I saw blood and gore 3-4 times a week, it took a lot of the interest of that type of film off my plate. Like, I've lived the real thing, seeing this bullshit on film. It sucks. It's stupid. And, I don't need to, whatever. So yeah, I burn out on that. I don't know why I said that. Anyway, yeah. So, but I was always more into the spiritual suspense stuff. I grew up not spiritual at all, but, stuff like Prince of Darkness, stuff that's creepy but supernatural in the religious way, stuff like that. So, but I don't ever really watch that shit anymore. I'm not a movie guy much anymore. It's weird. It's really weird. But I do still think, however, that the horror and metal connection is still alive and well. It obviously is. And I try to think, what are these like bands like Morbific or, all these new like Fluids? What are they going to sing about? How hard the streets are, or how you should make good choices and, be a good person, or social, political stuff. Yeah, that can be done. Punk bands do it. It just doesn't translate well to brutal death metal, maybe. So yeah, I think it still has its place. I think it still works. And in Rigor Mortis' case, the band, the song Bodily Dismemberment, there's a creepy aspect to that, picking up a woman, taking her back to your place and starts chopping her up. Maybe doesn't, the lyrical, calling a woman a bitch and a whore and shit, it's like, doesn't maybe translate well to this day and age, but, it's just, it kind of, the way he's singing and the way it's working with the music, it really kind of puts you in the headspace of the character he's playing. So, I mean, it can still work really well. And is, and especially in the thrash, thrash was always the more social political side because of the punk, influence, I think, than, death metal was. Death metal was more, look at Cannibal Corpse. It's just hack and slash and, come blood, all that stuff. So I think it still has its place. Is it tired? Yeah, sure. It's tired, but what do we have to choose from? What is it? And ultimately, having said that, a lot of bands aren't trying very hard, but you look at like Symphonies of Sickness or Necroticism. Here's some very intelligent people, kids from UK that picked up a medical encyclopedia and started writing these really freaking sick, awesome lyrics out of all this terminology, and, having it mean different things. And, is it attuned to their veganism and all these statements. There's all these political and social statements mixed into this really horrific, dialogue. I just think Carcass, they took a trope, a tired and true idea, and made it something really freaking cool and super sick, and did something to advance it forward, did something with it, where a lot of bands just, oh, cool, stab with the knife. Or they, or 122 stab wounds or whatever. I mean, it's just like, someone with a good head in their shoulders can do something creative with these topics, and Carcass is one of them that grabbed the ball, ran with it, and took it somewhere that it hadn't really been before. Jim,
you wouldn't be the guy that put Necroticism at number 1 last week, were you?
I was one of them. That's one of my favorite albums. Yeah.
Yeah, I got about 5 minutes into that show, and I realized I'm going to be really pissed off, and so I stopped watching.
People don't realize, and everybody's coming at this thing as it's even with the Keeper Reaps. I try to put myself as a teenager listening to these albums. How many times I listened to these albums, what these albums meant to me when I was a teenager, and what it meant to me isn't going to be what it meant to Devin over in California. It's people just like, it's like, it doesn't agree. I don't agree with it, so therefore it's all stupid. Well, I get it. It's fun. It's still fun to piss people off.
Yes. That was the point of the exercise.
Yeah, Kellen. Yeah, exactly.
You did good. I'm just not.
Kellen was having. I could tell he was having a conniption fit in the chat. He's like, "Oh my god, I'm flipping tables over here."
Yeah, I think I made it about 10 minutes in, and I'm like, I still want to be friends with these guys, so I'm not going to watch this.
Another benediction record? How dare you?
Oh, I shot that shit down. I'm not a big fan.
Good album. That's it.
Yeah.
So for my question, I'll start with the latter half. Is it worn thin? I think in the modern age, a direct reference to a horror movie, yeah, I think that kind of thing is worn thin. In the 80s, we like to think, it's easy for, to kind of look back on it and say, this was kind of the latter era of thrash. It was the 80s, and, death metal was rearing its head. All of that's true. But still, in terms of like the music as a whole, and even metal as a whole, thrash was still relatively new. We're talking about like 81, 82. So we're talking about a 6-year period, right? And in that realm, like, doing things like what Rigor Mortis did, seems like, low hanging fruit. Let me grab a movie title. Let me sing about this movie. And it was, but, thrash was still kind of new and in terms of music in general. So it didn't really feel as like, hokey as it would feel today, and even though you knew that it was tongue in cheek, you listen to Rigor Mortis, especially the songs like Bodily Dismemberment. These guys aren't serious. He wasn't trying to convince people he was a serial killer like, Barnes was or anything. But at the same time, like I had a definite appreciation of when they would reference, movies that I really loved. And to Logan's point, there wasn't a lot of thrash bands that did this, but yes, there were death metal bands. And especially there was one early death metal band that did it right. Deicide's self-titled Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn, man. Yeah, still got my VHS that I bought many, many moons ago. And man, 3 stars, Roger Ebert. Yeah, Dead by Dawn on Deicide's self-titled, man. I love that song. It's completely about this movie. And that's my Evil Dead 2 is my favorite horror movie because it is like funny and gross, because it's got Ash in there, strapping a chainsaw to his stub hand and a shotgun in the other. Everything about that movie is just amazing. When the chick's screaming in the eyeball, she goes into her mouth.
It's funny as shit. Yeah,
it is. It's so hilarious. I made my wife's watch it early on in our relationship. I think she made it about 10 minutes in. She was like, not having it. But yeah, I love that song to this day. It's one of my favorite Deicide songs to this day. And just by way of topic here, and a lot of times when bands would do the kinds of things that they did, it would interest, like I'd go and like maybe check out the movie and stuff like that. So, but these days, yeah, I think it's been done. It's kind of played out. I can go back to that era and appreciate it for when bands like Rigor Mortis did it, but I don't think I want to hear it now. And to find something that's like just legitimately creepy on its own, like, Ruins of Everast, Bloodball. It's like that album is very creepy to me. Very, very terrifying. Like you play that thing loud in your house or even alone on your headphones, with your eyes closed, and you're going to get freaked out, or you're going to freak out everybody around you. And I have freaked out my family playing that album really loud in the house. And so I think that fear, the fear caused by the mysterious and the unknown is a deeper kind of fear, and much to your desensitization to Blood and Gore Marty by, being a, apprentice butcher, it's the same for just being a horror fan in general. You watch so much of it, and it's just not going to affect you anymore. That's why I don't care for like modern gory slash. I mean, like I've seen it all before. And I'd rather have the practical effects from the 80s than all the CGI crap now anyway. So yeah, I know I'm sounding like an old man here, but I don't care. I'm an old man. I like the old stuff better. And but yeah, these days, if I want to have fear in my metal, I prefer it to come from a more mysterious kind of place, to kind of take me there, with its riffs and its sounds, not so much its references to horror. But going back to my genesis as a metalhead, I do appreciate what those bands did, and I really enjoy it. So yeah, it's good. It's good where it is, but I'm glad to see that for the most part, metal has evolved past that, and everyone's exploring and trying to find new ways to embrace darkness, whether it be from a kind of a deeply psychological, philosophical, questioning, like I feel like, oh my God, my brain's like dropping here. I'm like Ulcerate does, or, something that's, dark and metaphysical and occult like Ruins does. I mean, those are where I feel it's most successful, but I can go down in the dirty to old death metal and thrash and really appreciate it. So.
All right. Well, let's discuss the musicality and composition. Oh, great question, by the way, Jim. Awesome. Discuss the musicality and composition of Rigor Mortis. Logan. Muted. Muted.
I'm muted. Sorry. Rookie mistake. To me, I want to approach this just saying to me, it's kind of cool to view this album almost as like a 3-piece. Because instrumentally, that's what they are. It's just that you got the single guitar player, the bassist who is basically a guitar player, and then the drummer, and then of course the vocalist. He does enough to warrant having his own part. But I think it makes it all that more impactful when you realize it's just 3 people behind all the instrumentation behind of the music, and especially when you're listening to the guitar, it sounds so busy. I mean, I know this has already been brought up, but it's sounds so busy, and it makes the album feel so full. But it's really just what Mike, you already said the name, Scaccia on guitar, and he just does a phenomenal job. His riffs are blistering, and his guitar solos are even more so. And for the most part, the album sounds full the whole way through. And you can tell when he goes off into the guitar solo, there's no one underneath him besides.
I think that's
bassist.
cool. They did that so that they wouldn't
cool.
be. Yeah, they wouldn't pull any weird tricks that they couldn't reproduce live. It sounds cool. Yeah.
Yeah. There's even sometimes where you think it could be a second guitar, but I'm pretty sure it's actually just the bass, just cranked real loud. The opening to bodily dismemberment has this quick overlay, but I'm pretty sure that's just the bass versus the second guitarist. And it's cool that they really stuck to just being a 3-piece and didn't do any other studio tricks or hire a touring second guitarist. They just did what they did as a band, and I think it really carries through. That's definitely a highlight, is the fact that they pulled it off. I mean, the biggest MVP, I think, does have to go to Casey Orr, the bassist, who, Jim, you already nailed it. He's matching what the guitarist Mike is doing, note for note. It's phenomenal, and he's doing his own thing every now and then too.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's fun to listen to, and yeah, it's cool. So on one hand, I think that the fact that they're a 3-piece, that's a highlight. On the other, I do wonder what could they have sounded like if they had really worked with the second guitarist. Could they have sounded even fuller and stronger? That's more of a what if scenario than me nitpicking.
They probably couldn't find anybody in their area that could match Mike, so they're like, "Fuck it, we don't need him."
Dude, that guy was on another level, and to hear all of his band credits too, that's cool. I will say the vocal performance by Bruce, that was probably the element of the recording I had the toughest time with, especially in the beginning. There's so much reverb, and he takes up so much space in the recording, and he almost sounds like Paul Bailoff at times with that bark he does, and it has the kind of reverb and echoing effects that for some of the tracks I think it takes away from the songwriting, especially when behind the reverb and the bark there's just only one guitarist and the bassist and the drummer. It's a lot to fill out and to compete with that kind of vocal performance. I also thought his vocal performance changed throughout the album. In the beginning,
there's some recording differences.
There's a lot of recording differences. I will mention this later on in the production, but that is going to be my sticking point with the album. Everything else is fine, but in the beginning, his vocals are more in the forefront and kind of reverbed out and just crazy. And then throughout the album, it's he finds his actual voice. And some kind of underdog story. He comes and he sounds like an actual thrash metal vocalist at the end, kind of on track Die in Pain. That's when his voice, it sounds like there's no effects and it's just him really belting it out. And I'm a big fan of that. And kind of the rest of the album where his vocals are they feel a bit more natural to me. And I definitely enjoy it. But I do like it in the beginning as well. It's just I feel like the music overall fits better when he's in that vocal range. So other than that, his presence lyrically as well as just being the frontman showman type is perfect, and it fits the subject matter, and it really sells the horror 1980s aspect perfectly. So this is just fun and, you know, not simple. Definitely a lot
No.
to look
Complex,
at and
yeah.
try to keep up with, but they don't lose that fun feeling, you know? And I commend them for that. So yeah, cool all around for sure.
All right, Cullen.
So super fast. I mean, the overwhelming majority of this record is blistering. The first thing I thought of when I heard the pace of like the riffs was Holy Terror. Just how like dense that sort of I was waiting for, you know, Jim made the point about this isn't your traditional kind of like thrash mosh whatever. Like I missed, you know, as much as this is super fast of a, you know, in terms of a listen, I missed a little bit of the crunch that I would typically get from like a thrash record. You lay that on a like solo lead riff, those lines tend to blur on this listen. So like Logan mentioned in Die in Pain, the main portion of that song, it's like he's sliding down the entire neck while he's sort of playing. It's whether it's an actual, I don't know if it's a solo or just a weird sort of like it's not a clear no. It's very much like in one hand he's picking and the other hand just sliding down the guitar. There's like a scrape that happens during the course of the verse. And so it's not like a punk slide or anything like that. It's just a weird sort of descending noise that goes on with his guitar.
Plus, Casey Orr sings on that one, so it's more of a punk vibe in his vocal style.
Right, and like you know, and it doesn't quite meet the horror thing. It's very much like their political militant song of the record, but it was just one of those things. Like, here's a clear moment where you could do a very traditional sort of like straightforward thrash song, and he chooses a decidedly different path that in terms of how you want to play guitar during that section. But yeah, he's all over this record, and it is for me the standout feature of their sound, and for me also serves as an equal distraction. I felt it was difficult sometimes during the course of this listen to really like sink into this record, just because he is going 100 miles per hour for the overwhelming majority of this listen. And it's not like just clear rhythm stuff. It is solo lead, weird scraping noises, like a very inventive way to approach a super fast thrash listen. But I think it's also going to be potentially alienating for someone who jumps into this record and they aren't prepared for that, or they want something, you know, I put on like Onslaught the Force to try and give myself a little bit of like what am I looking for? Like, what is a thrash record that grounds me in a certain way? And that
God, I love that album.
So, but it just sounds so different. It's not nearly as fast. It's much heavier in tone. The guitar. So we'll get to the production later, but I just wanted to set that aside as like a comparative sort of, you know, what I'm throwing this up against. The moment on 2 weeks been talking about how there's sort of shared collective, you know, talent in terms of instrumentalists. On Condemned to Hell at around the 2-minute mark, there's a moment where all three, the drumming, bassist, guitarist, all lock up, and there's a weird sort of like up and down they all do together, and you don't get a glimpse into their ability to sort of match, or the bassist and the drum sort of matching the guitar work going on. But every single time I came to Condemned in Hell, that 2-minute mark, when they splinter off and do something totally like interlocked, it was like, what am I listening to? I thought it was a solo, but it's actually like a collective rhythm section. It's a really cool moment. It's my favorite moment on this entire record, but it's a cool sort of like instrumental flex that they do at around 2 minutes into that Condemned in Hell song. For me, yeah, the vocals and the lyrical content, it's the moment I sort of like rolled my eyes was in Bodily Dismemberment.
Yeah.
When he's like, I think what was the line? Your pretty little head. Like that moment, I like, oh my God. This is ridiculous. Like it was complete, like they're having a good time writing this. It's obviously inspired by the horror stuff, and some gruesome death scenes. But I was like, oh man, okay. I get it. I can understand why the bassist went on to be in GWAR. Like they're having a good time over here, right? The one part I also want to say, like, it's interesting. Sometimes you can set up like the song structure and a vocal arrangement to where, like, if you have a great vocalist, they can demand your attention, or any individual on a record. But like on the end of Slow Death, there's like a moment where they really set the entirety of the closing moments of that song, where it slows down. He kind of gets a full passage to sort of narrate, and then it launches into a solo. I just thought it was a way that they sort of had been hinting at this kind of like theatrical humor for the entirety of the record, and you get like it crystallized in that moment. So I just thought it was an interesting way to sort of approach that. But that's kind of my general notes on the songwriting here.
All right, Jim.
Yeah, musicality and composition, man. Yeah, there's absolutely no denying, man. Mike is 100% a shredder, but it's not like, and for me anyway, it's not like an annoying like Yngwie Malmsteen shredder. Though, yes, I own some Yngwie.
Well, me too. I got the first 3 records. Hell yeah,
exactly. I got the Force and all
Stop
that.
after Trilogy.
Yeah, but in general, like, especially in the era that Marty and I came up with, like the neoclassical thing came, and then it really wore itself out really quickly. But Mike is just kind of more of an all around, like really great fast guitar player. It's not just neoclassical. He actually does a lot of finger tapping on this and does it really, really well, and integrates it into the song. And that, which I already alluded to earlier, like, that's one of the standout things about this album is just like he's always playing fast. He's always got the tremolo going almost all the time. And when he kind of implements that sort of guitarist heroics, where he's like doing the intro to the song, like Bodily Dismembered, for instance, like that song starts out with he's he's like doing finger tapping right there at the very beginning, but it just makes sense. It just sounds eerie and cool. He uses a lot of effects. He's used a lot of chorus, he uses a lot of phase, so it's coming in and around and on the speakers and stuff like that.
There's one song where it's like bouncing between, it's like back and forth, this weird panning thing, which is cool.
Yeah, I think that one is it's Wizard of Gore. He does that one in, and it's super cool. And I think that in the context of Rigor Mortis, like all that stuff really adds to it. It really, it was one of the reasons why, like, when they got dropped from Capitol after this and they went to Metal Blade and did the Freaks EP, like I didn't like the Freaks EP because it sounded too bland for me. You know what I mean? Like, part of what for me, like, raised Rigor Mortis's profile, because I bought a lot of thrash. I had tons of thrash cassettes from all over the world, all kinds of bands. And what made Rigor Mortis stand out for me then and now is their embracing, Mike's especially embracing of all those effects, like to make it really, it made it really weird and unique sounding. You know what I mean?
Very guitar player's album, a guy that actually tinkered with gear, and
he
made it work for the band.
And he didn't do like everyone else was doing. Like he didn't scoop the guitars, and I even did that as a guitar player too. Like, oh, I want that scoop. I want it heavier. Mike was like, nah, I'm just going to invert that. I'm thinking like, super high end, more like what a black metal guitar player would have done in terms of like tone. Like he went after the highs, and even his riffs. There's a lot of riffs on here where he's playing really high up on the neck, man. Or playing in like, like D, and not drop D, but actually like, the regular,
D standard.
D standard. Yeah. And, so, just a lot of cool decisions that were, he would just go the opposite way that a lot of other thrash guitar players were going. And then, and Casey, man, he never leaves Casey behind. In fact, Casey just takes the mantle. He was just as good of a bass player as Mike was as a guitar player. And, and being a young bassist, at the time, 15 years old when this record came out, and I would just like put my face in front of the speaker and listen to what Casey was doing. And it was just behind the solos. And to me, it was just as interesting as the leads, if not even more for me. And it still is to this day. And for him to have that powerful and cool of a guitar sound, using a pick, but it doesn't sound clingy. having a great bass sound, but it's not distorted at all. But it just sounds good, man. I mean,
It's a punk
that
bass
guy-
sound. It's kind of a punky bass sound.
yeah,
cool.
it's just it is. It's full and it's present. And it's really awesome. And the drummer, has like a more compared to Mike and Casey has a very more simple style, but it's still unique. Like he does weird little like tom hits here and there that you don't expect, and even in Bodily Dismember, like when Bruce is saying the line, I'm slicing you in six pieces or whatever, and at that point, every time he goes to that line, the drummer does a quick blast. He's like, "Da, da, 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 da," and he'll do it like that. Then he'll hit the ride, but then he goes back to like the slow thing. It's just really quick. It's like you gotta, it's almost like you have to listen for it, because the snare isn't up high in the mix, but him just like throwing these little tidbits in there, like made him, even though he's not a double bass guy, very little double bass on this record, he's still a really good drummer. Like I could see this guy just having like a one bass kick and a tom and a couple of cymbals, but he's making it work, man. And to me, that's just impressive. Like, to be like a minimalist kind of a drummer, but to keep up with guys of this caliber. And when you take that and you bring it all together with Bruce's like, ability to enunciate, clearly, but also still sound aggressive, it to me is like a quintessential thrash album, and it kind of like encapsulates like what thrash can be. It's entertaining, it's musically proficient, and and it's kind of timeless because they always chose to go left when everybody else was going right, and that's why this record is kind of like stayed not too far outside of the metal psyche. That's why the vinyl is still really expensive on Discogs, that and its rarity. And I think it's because it just doesn't really sound like anything else. And that's not just because of the production. It is partially because of the production, but it's also because of the way that they put their riffs together, and the way that each of the musicians work together, and the way that they put their songs. It's really hard to kind of pigeonhole them, like like I said earlier, there's definitely some Slayer in there, and Kellen, I think you're right. I do think I hear a little bit of Holy Terror here sometimes too. I really love that you said that, because I thought it and I didn't write it down. So
someone mentioned earlier too Whiplash and like the cleanliness of the sound and the riff style.
Yeah,
Whiplash, like Power and Pain.
Makes perfect
That's
sense.
really great. Yeah, it was Psychic Vacuum, Eric. Yeah, he nailed it.
That's a great call out. I completely agree. So but again, what do all those thrash bands have in common? Different, unique, hard to pin down, kind of making their own mark and being timeless because of it, and even though Whiplash and Rigor Mortis kind of share like a simpler kind of a lyrical content, the guitar playing was very interesting. I would say Rigor Mortis' guitar playing is more over the top, but still like unique and memorable. Like Holy Terror, man, their riffs are super unique and super memorable. And all three of these bands, I still listen to this day, where a lot of those old thrash bands I don't listen to. The ones that stood the test of time are bands like this. So yeah, man, I think they fully meet the mark on musicality and composition.
I 100% agree. And ultimately, this is a very much a musician's band. You listen to what's going on here. The musicianship is top notch. Mike's riffs are most people's solos, but when he gets to the solos, he like amps it up 10%, and it's just like a hurricane of notes. But every note is played completely clean. You can hear every single. It isn't like a slurry of shit. It's actually each note has its own presence. The speed of the riffs, you mentioned Holy Terror, and Holy Terror is one of those bands. I want to call them, speed metal. I'm like, these guys fit the bill, but there's something about them that keeps them in the thrash realm for me. Rigor Mortis is the same way. They present themselves as a speed metal band. The speed in which things are being played, the style of riffing, but there's something about the overall sound that keeps it in the thrash zone for me. What do you guys think? Do you think what is this? Is this a speed metal hiding as a thrash metal album? And not that this matters. Something I was thinking about throughout the week.
I mean, do you want to take it, Logan? I see.
For me, I think it's thrash. Like I've approached a couple of these as like, well, is it speed? Is it thrash? We had, Liege Lord one week and then Destructor the next week. I don't know what to do, but this was like, it's thrash. I did not waver on that. Maybe it was the vocal performance. Like, it's just such a thrash way of approaching vocals, and like, I think even the guitar, just the non-stop intensity of the guitar feels like thrash to me.
Okay.
But that's my take.
Kellen?
Yeah, I mean, if this had a different guitar tuning, it's without question a thrash record. The fact
It's too clean to be speed metal.
There's something to me. I think it's a thrash record altogether. Like, it just, but the other part, there's other aspects of Holy Terror in terms of the vocals, and I hear like parts of their sound though. I mean, maybe especially on Mind Wars, maybe not so on Terror and Submission, but their songwriting became a much more, I think, like, it's not just all out pacing. And this is, so I think they fall closer to speed metal to me, where I think this is much more of like a really, that I understand what you're saying about like the guitar playing, but I'm going to lean thrash with this if I had to choose between the two.
What do you think, Jim?
I get where you come from, Marty, because like there's a relentlessness in tempo here, where speed metal was that way too, where it was like kind of the same tempo throughout, just fast, and it wasn't like, okay, here comes the mosh part. That wasn't speed metal. Yeah, I mean, it was just fast. You know what I mean? In that way, Rigor Mortis kind of shares that same sort of like intention. But I do feel that because the speed is more like tremolo picking, skank beats, that kind of thing. Like I definitely feel like this is a thrash album, and if it had come out like in '85, like Logan said, I think it would have been like a proto death metal album. You know what I mean? With its lyrical content and its speed, and even just some of the way the tremolo riffs work. But I do instead of it is and a latter era thrash album, but whether they were intent upon it or not, definitely from their themes, or they were leaning into that death metal aesthetic. And I think that's probably why, Freaks has stood the test of time with a lot of Rigor Mortis fans, because it sounds, it is so not like this. It's no effects. It's very raw. It's a straightforward guitar sound, still with a, gory kind of lyrics. That album, that EP does sound proto death. You know what I mean? But I definitely think that Rigor Mortis self-titled is firmly rooted in thrash.
Yeah. I mean, just the way the guitars are played, I'm like, God, I want to call this a speed metal record, but it just doesn't have the feel. But I mean, anyway, songwriting, composition. I mean, there is not a misstep on this record. There isn't a note that sounds wrong, out of place. The songs are all, the thing of it is, the guitar playing is so clean and so intense. He somehow finds a thread throughout each song that's very memorable. And then they put a tasty chorus on top of it, or all these. Each song has its own entity, its own feel to it. So the songwriting on here is top notch. There was a lot of attention to detail. Yeah, I'm gonna approach this whole process from a very technical guitar shredder standpoint. That's gonna spill into my riffs, but I'm never gonna lose sight of memorable content that brings people back. I mean, because I've said it here a million times, super techie shit can be very alienating. It just can. It's like, ooh, the shock and awe factor. Once that wears away, give me a song. I don't care about the flash and the pomp and the dog and pony show. I want to hear songs.
Oh, you spent 12 hours in your bedroom working on scales. Oh, that's cool, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry about your sex life, bro. Anyway, yeah, but here, this is, I think, a really well-composed record from start to finish. No missteps. There's no songs on here that made me go, ooh, I don't wish I didn't do that. Even on Die in Pain, where Casey's singing, it's a different feel, but it still feels like the same band, even though there's more of a punk aesthetic in the vocal style. It works. It just works. And let's get into production. Kellen.
So this is like the on the opposing spectrum of Slaughter for me. Like the guitar tone is like the signature aspect of the production overall here, and you're going to love it or you're going to hate it, but it's played completely different. So it was the standout feature to me. It's on the higher end, right? It provides this record with so much personality. But for me, I found it after a while a little bit taxing. I would have loved a little bit more weight to the guitar tone or dynamic contrast between what was happening in the rhythm versus the solo, but it's so seamless. So it's not like it's easy to do that. And it's dependent on a 3-piece for him to be able to sort of swim in and out of those two spaces, or, for me, the guitar tone here is going to win you over and you're going to love. It's a unique approach to what it was offering within thrash by 1988. Or it's going to be, in my case, like, man, I really have to sink into this sound. I do 100% agree with the point, though, about it sounding a little bit more like a punk record, because there is clear division between guitar and bass tuning.
Yep.
When you listen to a punk record, there is some gap there because there's less weight going on. So you can hear like cleanly what's going on bassist wise, and that does serve how articulate these musicians are in the mix. I do wish there was a little bit more body to the drums. I don't necessarily mind the playing at all, but it just feels, in terms of weight and size, that part was a little bit of an issue for me. So, but this is an underground thrash record. So, like, am I really asking too much here? I kind of feel like that's part of the charm when you listen to a record like this. So I did have some sort of, like, I don't know, there's parts of this record sonically that left me wanting, just because it didn't necessarily fit my sort of what I desired to hear from a thrash record of this caliber. But for a lot of people, I think you're going to end up gravitating towards this record for the things that I dislike about it.
All right, Logan, talk a minute. I got to go potty. I'll be right back.
I'm going to say that for me, the production is kind of my least favorite part of the album, and just how it approached it. And it felt uneven throughout. And I felt like I could follow the sound of the guitar and the sound of the vocals and the drums even. And like their placement in the mix would change throughout the album, and like where it started and where it ended. They were all different in the mix, and like in the prevalence, and just the feel and the tone of it. And it just makes it feel uneven throughout, and kind of weird. Like on certain songs, the guitar feels relatively low in the mix and kind of gets lost. And maybe it is because of that guitar tone that very much focused on the higher end. It kind of blurs in or is overshadowed by where the vocals are. And as I said, the vocals feel kind of high in the mix at times. I don't know. For me, I always have issues with the production in the first like couple songs, like the first third of the album. I'm always like, what is going on? And then by the time it gets to Die in Pain and Vampire and Reanimator, I'm like, this production's awesome. I love it. So it's just a weird, I don't know, maybe that's just me settling into it, and it just takes some time to get used to the feeling that it gives. But I don't know. I still, 8 listens in, I still have that feeling of like the production doesn't mesh in the beginning, and I'm like trying to find where the guitar is for the the main riff, and where it's going, even on like the solos sometimes, and then the vocals are kind of just overshadowing everything. But then towards the end of it, everything feels a lot more even and kind of perfectly where I would want it. Like I would not change a thing about the production of Reanimator or Slow Death or Die in Pain, but I would very much change something about Demons or Condemned to Hell and stuff like that. So I felt a little weird about the production. Like some of the tracks, it feels like a mixing bowl, kind of everything swirling around kind of in the middle. And then others, it feels like there's an actual room that we're all in listening to this. So I will say the consistent king of the production is the bass. It's always the same, no matter what song we're in. And yeah, definitely the overall highlight of the album, both instrumentally and also production-wise, is the bass playing by Mr. Orr there. So,
All right, Colin.
I talked about production. I think it's Jim's turn.
Well, my P reset me, so you just have to talk about it again. I'm good. Jim.
So take everything that Logan just said and turn it upside down.
So you are wrong, sir.
You're wrong, sir. No, I just have a completely opposite opinion. Those are my favorite songs on the album. I love the first 4 tracks, like the most, except for Dying Pain is one of my favorites. But Welcome to Your Funeral, even though it's an instrumental, super cool instrumental, a great introduction to this album. I mean, you got to have something really strong to open without any vocals, and for me to like it. I'm not usually a fan of when bands do that, but it works here. Demons, I mean, you guys heard me earlier. I mean, I freaking have the song memorized. Lyric. I love the lyrics. I love the riffs. I love everything about it. I love the heavy chorus on the guitars. I love that it's high end and piercing. I love the solo. Everything about it. Bodily Dismemberment, a great mid-tempo banger. Lyrics are a little questionable these days, but I think it bothers us more just because we can understand them. If Chris Barnes were intelligible, we would probably be saying the same things about Tomb of the Mutilated or whatever. But again, great riffs, great runs, cool scales, cool stuff like that. And I like the phase and the chorus and all those kinds of things that he throws on there. You're right, Logan, that what you're hearing is that the album gets closer to the end, he starts using less and less effects. He gets more of a kind of a straight kind of a sound. But to me, what makes Rigor Mortis is his experimentation, not just with his riff styles, but playing around with effects, like using things like phase and chorus. They're usually reserved only for like leads. He's doing them on the riffs. And, even, Trey Zagthoth and Morbid Angel, he liked to use a good phase, often, but he wouldn't do it like the whole song. Like this guy, Mike just like hit the pedal and never turned it off. He left it on. And I just think it's really brave to do that and for it to still sound super heavy, still sound super memorable. So I love the production on it. And, I liked the guitar is thin, again, because it stood out in contrast to everything else. You got to remember, this is 88. This is the year Injustice for All came out, right? And all you could hear was guitar. Just thick wall of guitar, no bass, and then drums. I remember putting that tape in for the first time. I was like, what is this? It took me a long time to get that record. And I still, like most people, hate the fact there's no bass guitar on it.
Because it feels like all the air was sucked out of that mix. It's like,
it's really weird.
Like in an airplane, they suck out all the pressure. Yeah, that's what that album sounds like.
Yeah, when I listen to Injustice now, I usually go to that YouTube one, the Justice for Jason, and this is where they get the bass on. I'm like, okay, that sounds cool. I like that. But hearing this in that same year, it was very refreshing for me. It was just so different from what everyone was doing, but it was fast. It was mean. It was controversial lyrically, and I just had a killer bass sound, the complete antithesis of everything that like Metallica was doing at the time. And so, all those choices that they made, and even with like the choice of like putting the drums a little further back in the mix, whereas like again, contrast that with Injustice for All you hear is like bass drum, snare, really simple tom hit, do 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 do, and then you hear like this is just guitar, vocal bass, drums a little back. Like they just said, it's like they listened to that album and said, we're going to do the exact opposite. And what's more metal than that? Just go in the complete different way. Instead of like a dry, super heavy James Hetfield, no, we're going to wash it in delay and chorus and just like, you're just going to have to deal with it, So whether or not that was intent or just personal preference or some kind of mixture of both, it doesn't matter. It works for me. It still does. It did then, and it continues to. So yeah, honestly, I don't have any complaints about it. I wouldn't change a thing. The risks that they took, the kind of like sort of like metal standard, like, approach to, studio choices. They threw that book out the window. And yet this is still 1000% a pure thrash metal album. And you really got to, know your chops, and you really got to be able to create memorable songs to die on that hill. And I think they did. And they're living in rigor mortis for it.
Yeah, production. We're on production, right? This was, my buddy bought this tape back in the day. I listened to the production. I'm like, man, this shit's so fucking slick. So, the Capitol production. Oh, they got the Capitol money. And ultimately, you listen to the lyrics on this record and what this record is. It's hilarious that this is on a major label. It's just, what the fuck is this doing on a Capitol Records? But there's a cleanliness to this record. Yes, there's an inconsistency to this record. It sounds like they probably got a good recording budget to go into a decent studio, but they have to do it late at night when they could maybe afford get a little bit further, and they'd have to go in at different days. It just sounds like there's a difference in some of the quality. But the one thing that's unifying here is the fact that the guitar sound doesn't really change much. The bass sound doesn't change much. You could tell it's not like a horrendous shift where it's like it sinks the album for me. It just sounds like it was recorded at different times. But for me, the guitar tone is too clean. It's too clean on its own. But you listen to it in the context of the whole album with that clean ass bass, it just rips, and the drums and the vocals and the way it's all mixed, it all sits where it needs to sit. And after you get over the 30 seconds of it, you acclimate pretty quickly. And I'd like a little more grit and grime in that guitar tone, but listen to what he's playing. More grit and grime and more low end to that guitar tone. It's gonna muddle the whole fucking thing. So I think they probably chose what works best for what they were doing for Rigor Mortis. A lot of depth and grime and more gain on that guitar tone would have just fucked up the whole thing. But I think for what it is, it doesn't sound like a Bay Area thrash record. It doesn't sound like an East Coast thrash record. Doesn't even sound like Southern metal. It doesn't sound like an Ex-Hoarder or Pantera record. It sounds like Rigor Mortis. It's weird. It's weird how they got this sound. They're kind of like, they've avoided the geographical pinnings of what scenes can produce. A scene can produce a particular sound. All the people in the scene go to the same studio, or they share members. They got, so-and-so is using this pedal. And I mean, like, look at it now. That's one thing about modern death metal. Killer sounds amazing, but they're all using the same plugins. They're all using the same heads or whatever. They're all using the same gear. So they're all producing stuff that sounds very similar. And that's what happens in scenes. It is. But Rigor Mortis somehow removed themselves from that. And the recording isn't perfect. Like I said, it lacks consistency, but nothing is wrong with it. It presents well. It really allows the band's intensity to explode out of the speakers at you. So mission accomplished. They got their own sound. They maintained their own sound up against the fact that they had different levels or different sounds throughout the recording. It's a good sounding record, even though it's not what you would expect from that era. Favorite, least favorite songs? Kellen.
So I was in the middle of talking about how I think so many Destruction records have strange production going on, but anyway.
Oh my God. Eternal Devastation.
Yes.
That is the worst, coolest guitar tone ever.
Yeah.
Like I said, it sounds like it was recorded on tinfoil.
Super.
I love it. It sounds great.
Yeah. Super strange. Okay. Favorite songs here. So the ones that I would say like I would point to as sort of clear cut. This is a great example. I love the opener Demons. I guess Welcome to the Funerals technically has an instrumental of the opener, but Demons, and that moves in like later on the second half of the record, Die in Pain. Those two tracks for me, in some ways, they operated some of the more simpler tracks overall. I talked about sort of that sliding guitar where that's happening in Die in Pain. I do think the opener Demons is a great sort of window into what this record is. Like I mentioned earlier on, my favorite track, though, is Condemned to Hell. That break in there, I think, is one of such a cool... Like, I'm just trying to think if there was a different thrash record that offered the same kind of, like, combined solo guitar, really soloing in unison. It's such a cool moment. And it's also, I do think, one of the few moments where we get, like, a very sort of... Because they're splintering off together, there's windows, you like insight into like a double bass actually happening, which you don't really hear on this record because of the way the drums are produced. But anyway, that's such a cool moment. So favorite track on the record. And then I do think as a closer, right, I talked about the theater and the humor and sort of that aspect of this record. So Slow Death, I think that actually is a great way to end this album overall.
Logan.
Yeah, I kind of alluded to it earlier. I find myself drifting and not immediately being hooked by the first portion of the album. I do like the opening instrumental, but I don't know. For whatever reason, tracks Demons and Condemned to Hell just don't click with me. I never end up remembering them. And like you're talking about that cool section, I don't remember it. I don't know. I never broke out of whatever.
Time stamp is going in the chat. Here we go.
Please put the time stamp in the chat. I would love to hear that. It sounds awesome. I've only heard it 8 times, but yeah. So those are like the tracks that just don't click with me, and I kind of chalk it up to like I'm being distracted by the vocals or the production. Like I always thought the guitar sounded the thinnest kind of on those 2 songs for me, where I'm just like trying to keep track of it and it's just not as towards the front. And then as soon as Wizard of GWAR comes on, I'm like kind of shaken from a trance and I'm like into the like slower, quieter intro. And then the crazy panning that he does with the verses with that weird guitar effect. I'm like, what is he doing? This is like a weird like Gojira like pinch harmonic kind of thing. It's kind of, I don't know, kind of brilliant. And that's just a fun song. Like I still have issues with the production on some of it, but it's a fun song and the guitar solo is like top notch. And I think that's one of the ones where the bass is really just going hard in it. So Wizard of GWAR is definitely up there. And then it just keeps building. Like Shroud of Gloom, I think is a great song as well, which perfectly transitioned to my favorite, which is Die in Pain. And I didn't realize it was Orr singing, but maybe that's why it's my favorite. I love the vocal performance on it, and just it's that the chorus is great. The main guitar riff that guides the song is just a lot of fun, and it's just what a ripper. And then Vampire and Reanimator are both great songs as well. As I said earlier, any track that is about Reanimator, phenomenal. And then the chorus is just Reanimator, reanimate me, Reanimator, reanimate me.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah, come on. Like it's automatically a top tier track. And then, oh my god, I love the closer, Slow Death. Jim, were you planning on quoting like the closing part?
Mike, bring me a glass.
Okay, I'm not. I'm gonna save it. I'm gonna save it for Jim then. But come on, this was made for the live environment. This was made to interact with like the crowd. It opens with the sound clip. Looks like Rigor Mortis is setting in. I could just see it right now, dude. Like them all getting up on stage. The sound clip plays, and then they start playing the song, and it's just so ridiculous, so over the top. I love it. It's probably one of the most fun songs I've heard in a long while. I just visualize them playing this live and them doing that one section. Well, what have we here? You all look a little scared. Or should I say prepared? I'll let you do the rest, Jim, but that's just fucking amazing, dude. And then after that comes the tempo change with the bass guiding the rest of the song into that brilliant guitar solo and stuff. So yeah, I love like the second 2/3 of this album. Not the second, so just the last 2/3 of the album for sure. So
All right. Jim.
Cool. Well, I obviously I picked it, and there isn't for me a weak moment on this record. I love it all. Definitely, Demons and Bodily Dismemberment, mainly because of the music, and Condemned to Hell, Wizard of Gore. I mean, I just love the tremolo riff in Demons. I love the vocal delivery. I love the vocals themselves. The lyrics are easily memorable. They're fun to scream along with or yell along with. So yeah, I whenever I play this record, I always at least play those first like 3 or 4 tracks. But I also play Dying in Pain, man, because I completely agree, man. When Casey grabs a hold of that mic, it's still pure rigor mortis, even without Bruce singing on it. But man, it's just, I love, to your point, what I call it the tunnel harmonic riff, Kellen, because when you play guitar to do that, like you just hover your hand over, and you just kind of, bring it down and around. And he does that with such perfection on every time. I mean, and, I'm sure it's hard to pull off live, but I mean, as good of a guitar player as he was, I'm sure he did perfectly. It's not something I could do more than once correctly on stage. But I mean, but man, it's so cool. You live by the blade, you die by the same. Die again back. I just love it, man. All your prayers are said in vain. I mean, it's like we've heard like lines like that a million times before, but with Casey's, we really have, but with Casey's delivery. And in '88, it just still works and it still resonates. He's just got a great voice, and it just comes across as metal as hell and severe. I'm sure it helped his entrance into GWAR. But yeah,
and
man,
GWAR was really a good place for him too, because they had a punky vibe to him as well. He was kind of the perfect fit.
I think so too. I mean, there's definitely like that sort of smirky humor going on with rigor mortis, which obviously is a huge part of GWAR. So I think it was, and with him being just an incredibly good bass player too, he's got the look. It was perfect, transition for him. Vampire, crazy whammy bar solo at the beginning, and I just love that line. You will rot. It's like, wait, I didn't know vampires rotted. I thought they didn't do that, right? But, what do I know? And of course, yeah, Reanimator, man, that song is like you're right on the nose with that with Logan. That's like, it's such a simple song. It's one of the simpler songs in the album. Riff is simple, the chorus is simple.
That chorus.
But dude, you just want to do it every time. Reanimate all, reanimate me. Reanimate all, reanimate me. And I just love how Bruce does the little scream at the end. It's perfect, man. Like I love that song. And that's another one that it's right up there, it's right up there with Dying Pain. I mean, I always listen to that. I don't ever play that song without listening to that one. But Slow Death, perfect closer. It is very theatrical, funny as hell, just like Casey, rip off their flesh, Arden, prepare to make my carcass stew. It's so ridiculous, but yet so awesome, and then Mike just they do this slow, very heartfelt solo, very moody, like being having your cannibal moment is like something to get really pensive about, and and introspective. It's so shouldn't work, but it just does, man. It's amazing. And yeah, and of course Casey's like all over the bass on it, just filling up the space, making it sound really cool. So yeah, man, I love every song on this record. I really do. It's just a killer album. But I would say if you don't listen to anything else, Demons, Dying in Pain, and man, I don't know. I think if I had to pick I don't know what my third one would be. It's a tie between like Reanimator and Bodily Dismemberment for two totally different reasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are my picks.
Again, nothing on here bothers me at all. First favorite song would be Bodily Dismemberment. I think we got so much ripping stuff in front of it. Having a song that's a little bit slower was a good choice at this point because we're going to pick up the pace again as we go. But I like the twisted, crazy lyrics on that thing. Wizard of Gore with the panning is super sick. I really love Reanimator. The chorus, of course, Die in Pain. I like the fact that they let, the lead singer can put the ego aside and let Casey sing a song, and he rules. It's more of a punk vibe on that song. Again, they do these little tiny things that break up the feel and what could be seen as monotony. They break it up with these little changes here and there. And then Slow Death, a great ending to the album. The funny thing is, I'm listening to this thing on Spotify, and it's the expanded edition remastered. So there's 3 bonus tracks: Foaming at the Mouth, Grudge Fuck, and Spivvy. Foaming at the Mouth, that song rips, man. I'm like, God damn it. I wish this was on the album to talk about because this album is awesome, just like the rest of them. The Spivvy is funny and goofy and kind of a typical 80s thrash thing. You have to have the silly kind of goofy song on there. But yeah, I have no... Oh, I forgot to blow me up. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Y'all know what I look like. It's start to finish, a lot of fun, a lot of energy, a lot of well-written riffs. It's a great album. Judgment, final thoughts? Kellen.
So if you're a 80s thrash purist and you've heard the same old thrash record, I mean... One of the things that I consistently hear is like by this time, thrash was becoming tired and predictable for people who lived through the era. So at some level, I'm sure this is going to be like, yeah, for people who were into super extreme stuff, the pacing of this, the aggression in it is probably going to work for you. I still think the arching theme though is just like the tonal shift of this record and the musicianship on display is going to be what brings you home. And people have been talking about the EP that followed the rest of the records. It seems to me this is very much like the iconic Rigor Mortis record that you pick up. And
I haven't heard the rest of the stuff, but I imagine it's an album they've been chasing. They only put out 3 things. Yeah. So yeah, I'm sure it's one of those things they can never really get back to.
Yeah, but I would just kind of go where I was originally kind of leading here is this is going to be maybe not someone's like, I don't know, the top. If you're going to only listen to 10 thrash records, I don't know if this is the one you recommend. But if you've heard those 10 and you want something that's going to have a totally unique personality, I think this fits the bill. I think this is going to work for you. And going into this week, I had no idea that it had such a unique sort of aspect to it with the guitar work going on. So for me, it was like maybe not going to be the one record I want to go back to, but if you're someone who loves 80s thrash, you need to hear this record.
Logan.
Well, I still stand by Jim having a type. Sloppy, fun, metal as fuck. This time I'm fully on board though. I'm like, I'm sold. I'm on the fun train. Rigor Mortis self-titled, the focus and the overall identity really grabbed me and was something that I could get behind. And I feel like this was a unique album for 1988 in the thrash scene because thrash was moving entirely away from this.
Well, it's moving into death metal.
Or it was just going like either a more technical route or a more commercial route even at this point.
Can't get more commercial than Capitol Records, really.
But this doesn't sound
Well,
commercial.
there's nothing commercial.
There's nothing
about
commercial
these-
about this.
Yeah.
Like,
Capital was looking for a buck, but Rigor Mortis was not going to make that buck.
yeah,
They didn't give a fuck
Rigor
about
Mortis,
the buck.
they dismembered that budget for sure. Like, this is just not. I'm sure it was not the hit they were, looking for.
Nope.
Capital.
That's why they only had a one and done album.
Yeah, that's why they got dropped and had to go to Metal Blade. They're like, people don't want to listen to Body Dismemberment on the radio.
Which they don't even really sound like a Metal Blade band either. Well,
they sound more like a Metal Blade band.
More Metal Blade than Capital.
Capital,
For sure.
So, that move made sense to me. I will say that the thrash going like horror theme, like as heavy as death metal was at this era, it just kind of fits. I like it. It makes sense. I want this to be a part of my, Halloween, October, just horror style kind of listening, and I would like to pick this up. I don't think that will happen. It seems very pricey. We need a good reissue if anyone can make that happen. But yeah, I'm happy with this album. This is easily a 8 to like an 8.25 for me, and I think it has staying power. I will be revisiting this, especially for tracks like Reanimator and Slow Death and fucking Die in Pain. I will say I did listen to the EP Freaks a couple times, actually a lot throughout the week, because after I would finish this, I would want a little bit more. And there's 20 more minutes of Rigor Mortis, and I liked it. It does sound more focused. It doesn't have that like the craziness and like the what the hell's going on kind of feel. So if that's what you liked about this album, then I could see it being a letdown. But for me, I was still like, I was happy with it. So I'll try to get Freaks as well at some point.
Well, this week righted a very big wrong. I mean, obviously, when you're younger, especially, you can't hear everything. And our internet was looking at album cover art, all the tropes we've talked about on here a million times. And the album cover art never spoke to me on this one. It just never did. I didn't like it. When I heard it, I already had a thing in my head. It wasn't going to be good. I was moving on to death metal, all this stuff. But, really paying attention to it and giving it the album club 1-2, giving it at least 8 or 10 spins throughout the week. Yeah, this one's coming back in my collection for sure. Hopefully I'll stumble across a vinyl pressing. That's 80s thrash just works so good on a fucking vinyl. It just does. It's just the way it's meant to be. Or tape. I hate to say that because I hate tapes, but man, that's the nostalgia zone for me. I bought as many tapes as I could with whatever money I had back in the day just to hear all this thrash shit. But LP for me, if I can find it again. I apparently need to move down to Australia where all original pressings go to die. Am I right, Simon? Yeah. Yep. That's just the way that works. I don't know how that
Damn you, Simon.
Yeah. But for me, this is a solid 8. The more I get more accustomed to these songs, it could probably go up to a 9 even. Again, I really appreciate the fact that this band is they maintain their own sound. It's great. Especially I can't say the same for other bands that got on a major label like Power Mad. It just so. I mean, it's just such like Absolute Power is such a so album. Decent, long, over. I don't know. We're not doing an album cover on Power Mad yet, but you never know. Jim.
All right. Expect no mercy from this maniac. Yeah, man. I picked it. Love this record. I think it's been clear the whole time tonight. Using my new system of rating, obviously a must buy for me, 100%. Had it on tape and I have it on CD. it's not enough. I gotta have some vinyl for this. And Marty, if I score it, I'll return your CD to you so you have it.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's this thing it's great. It makes me smile every time I listen to it. So many great songs on this. Obviously, rest in peace, Bruce and Mike. They left behind, some metal that has outlived them, but that still entertains. I would like to think thousands of fans. But I'm going to go ahead and give this my old school rating too, because this album deserves it. For this right here, it's a 9.5 out of 10 thrash album for me. Like I love this record a lot, and it's just a good time. But that good time isn't delivered in a way that diminishes its heaviness, because this is metal to the bone, and it's just pure thrash. So yeah, 9.5 out of 10.
There it is. So judgment has been cast upon Rigor Mortis, and it's a unanimous success for sure. And I think it's my pick.
I think that's
well,
correct.
I had a thrash pairing I've been wanting to do, like old TJ pull up a this versus that type of thing, but I'm not going to do 2 weeks in a row of thrash, so I'm going to have to savor that one for another date. But we're going to be talking about Witherscape, the Northern Sanctuary. People are like, what's this Witherscape stuff? Well, this is a Dan Swano project. He sings on it, writes some music with it with another guy. It's a duo. Yeah, death metal, Opeth-y type of stuff, but with Dan Swano. Dan Swano's version of Opeth, maybe? I don't know. But yeah, the Northern Sanctuary. This might be a little something different we haven't really talked about in a while, so we're going to talk about some death metal from a veteran of the genre, both in recording and creating. So Witherscape, the Northern Sanctuary, which is the second full-length album by this project. And that's that. Does anybody have anything? You guys have some channels I hope people are subscribing to. Logan, what you got coming up on the Metal and Beer Snob? Please go subscribe to the Metal and Beer Snob. The link is in the description.
Please do. I gotta edit. I have to edit a video, to clip out moments like that, and it'll be up hopefully this weekend. It's going to be a response to Daryl Celtic Frosty's initial. This was a couple weeks ago now. Your metal journey in 5 albums. So hopefully we'll have that up before the next time we meet.
All right, Kellen, what's going on over there at Killing for Company? People, go subscribe to Killing for Company. For God's sakes, do it.
Yeah, don't have anything coming up this weekend. I may be in Louisville, depending if we get hit by a tornado or not. So we'll see what happens, but nothing on the horizon yet.
Jim, everybody go subscribe or check out the Eihwaz Recordings web store. The web shop link is in the description. A lot of cool shit, tapes, some CDs, a couple records. Jim, what you got going on? Anything to report yet, or are we still in radio silence?
We are talking to a band right now that Logan turned me on to, and because we've been reaching out to bands here. But this one is the most promising. Nothing concrete yet. It's still early, but hopefully in 2025 we'll have at least one more. We'll have at least one release this year. But yeah, we got things going, and yeah, it's exciting. Nothing I can talk about yet, but looking forward to bringing something out of the Eihwaz realm with Logan's help. And Kellen's sending bands our way too. Kellen, by the way, I shared that Houston Grind band with Logan. He likes them as well, so we will. They're on the list.
Right on. As far as show notes for Heavy Metallurgy, look, we've got Lady Beast, Savage Master review that Logan did with Alan. I did Elven King review for their latest album, Reader of the Runes Luna. And Jimmy from Future Ruins YouTube channel just did his very first review on Monday for the new Ahamkara record. Not a lot of you are watching it. Come on. Watch some reviews. They're fun. You got clips. You get to hear songs. Do it. Friday. We don't know yet what's going on. I'm a little scattered. There'll be a show Friday, and there'll be somebody on it, and it'll be cool. So everybody join us on Friday. Go check out all these guys in the description, please, and subscribe to their channels or check out their web shops. And yeah, that's it. We'll see you on Friday. Another great week. Getting one day closer to that new Halloween record. Are you all ready? Everybody in the chat, you ready? I'm ready. Cheers. We'll see you next week.